All right, welcome to my ESL 42 students. Now I am beginning the reading lecture, and the reading lecture pertains to Chapter 4 in our reading text. And Chapter 4 begins on page 141. So we're going to start by reviewing this, and as before, I'm putting this up on the overhead so that you can see the annotations. If you have not already read and annotated this, of course I'm asking you please to go ahead and read and annotate it and stop the video. Do it first and then come back and listen to the lecture. Because the lecture is really trying to direct you to the things that you should have identified as important and help you understand things that I at least think might be a little bit tricky for you to understand. Okay, so you've done implied main ideas completely, and that would be from pages 141 to 155. Now I'm giving you the lecture about it, and the first thing I want to talk about is what it means to have an implied main idea. Let me make that particular concept clear. When we imply something, we say it without saying it directly. So let me give you an example, maybe having to do with cigarette smoking. If I said, cigarette smoking causes you to have bad breath and your clothes to smell bad. Cigarette smoking causes you to get sick more often. And finally, cigarette smoking can make you die young. So all of those facts, what would you say that a main idea of those three facts would be? Think about that for just a minute. So smoking makes you smell bad, smoking makes you sick, and smoking can even make you die. What's the message? I think if you figured out that smoking is a bad idea or smoking is unhealthy or not a good idea, then you're correct. I didn't say smoking was a bad idea, but I gave you 3 reasons why it was a bad idea, and you had to figure that out. That's an implied main idea. It's not stated directly. We imply things, or we infer from implication all the time. Another example I've often talked about is if we looked out the door here and we saw everybody walking through with a raincoat or wet or umbrellas, then we would figure out, it must be raining outside based on looking at those people. Again, they are telling us something indirectly. Nobody said, hey, it's raining, but they gave us all the information we needed to figure out for ourselves, infer from their implication, or being implied, what the weather is like outdoors. Okay, so you see here that sometimes the main idea in a piece of writing is implied. It's only suggested by the supporting details and not clearly stated in one sentence, like we've been doing. We've been finding a sentence in a paragraph, the first, the second, the last, a sentence in the middle. We've been identifying those main ideas. But now I'm trying to make you realize there is no main idea written in the paragraph. All they're doing, like the example I gave you with smoking, is giving you the facts, and you, as the reader, have to figure out what is being implied by that information. Just so you know, we're looking at this particular cartoon here. I'm not sure if you can see that on the overhead, but it says, the others, meaning the other people that work in this office. Again, we have to figure that out. We figure it's an office because it has a computer and professionally dressed people, so we figure it must be at work. All right, and he says, the others are complaining that you don't leave any coffee for anyone else. And of course, you see the cartoon, the guy's obviously got too much energy. So he's clearly, the idea is he's drinking too much coffee. So here, they're not telling us, hey, you're drinking too much coffee. It's just explaining that the others don't have coffee for anyone. All right, so there's an example. All right. Okay, so they're talking about here in the next section, implied main ideas in paragraphs, and they give you an example to work through. So please make sure that you do that. They give you an explanation. But here's what I want to talk about. This is on page 143 at the top. Again, if you can't see the page numbers on the video. It says, figuring out implied main ideas in paragraphs. That will be the main point of this particular chapter. So this is important. Make sure you read and understand this section. It says, to find implied main ideas, it often helps to decide on the topic first. Do so by asking yourself, who or what is the selection about? And what is the author's main point about that topic? So we already know that if we're trying to figure out who or what the selection's about, we look for repeated words. So if it keeps saying smoking, 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 we know, it must be saying something about smoking. And then we have to ask ourselves, what's the author's main point about the topic? And going back to my example of smoking, we can say, well, they said 3 things that are bad about smoking. So the implied main idea must be smoking is bad. Make sense? I hope so. All right, so go ahead and, of course, do this work in the textbook. Take care of the practices, please. You can always check your answers in the back. Next thing I want to talk about here is putting implied main ideas in your own words. Now, obviously, if it's an implied main idea, there's not one sentence that you can copy onto your test that says what the main idea is. Again, it's implied, so there is no sentence that's the main idea. You have to make your own sentence. So let's look at some of their suggestions here. This is on page 148. This page 148. Putting implied main ideas in your own words. It says, when you read, you often have to infer. Infer is what we do to an implication. So if I imply and you figure it out, you infer. So infer is kind of the opposite of imply. So if I imply something, in order to figure out, you must infer. Infer means thinking through something and understanding what's going on. Okay, so when you read, you often have to infer, or figure out on your own, an unstated main idea. The implied main idea that you come up with should cover all or most of the details in the paragraph. So you have to think of one sentence that would summarize everything, just like I did in the smoking example. Right? 3 reasons why it's bad. So if I was going to make a main idea about that, I'd say there are 3 reasons why smoking is a bad idea. Okay? Now here, you see major details are often signaled by the addition words. This is simply review. We've been over this many times. So go ahead and complete these examples. You will remember from our chapter on main ideas that in longer passages they call it the central idea or the thesis. I prefer thesis statement. This is more consistent with the longer pieces of writing that you'll probably be doing in your ESL 4D1 class and certainly in 51 class later as well. So when it's more than one paragraph, when it's a longer passage, that's 2, 3, 4 more paragraphs, you have to infer about the author's unstated idea, also called the central point or the thesis. Just like the unstated main idea, central point is simply when you look at a longer piece of writing, which you will find on the next page, by the way. And then you have to figure out what the main idea of that is. Do some practices. As always, on the final page of the chapter, this is page 155, you have chapter review. Always a good idea to annotate that, mark it, come back and review that before we take our test on this chapter. So that takes care of that. Now let me just quickly review. Okay, I'm asking you now to do the review test 1 and 2. And I'm going to turn this off. All right, so the next thing I'm asking you to do as part of your homework is on the very next page. That's page 156. I'm asking you to do review tests 2 and 3. Now, I do not need you to do review test 1. If you want to do it, that's fine. But that's more review of what we just did. So, number 2, mastery test number 2, mastery test number 3. Those page numbers are listed here. Page 156 through page 160. Yes, through 160. So that's what I want you to do for that chapter. And then I'm just reviewing here from the homework assignment. I also want you to do mastery tests 3 and 4, page 133 and 136. All of this is on our Blackboard site with the homework.